Hi, today we're making this pen and the blank that was used to make this pen. But this video is not about that. It's about using this jig to make the pen. Hope you stick around. Oh, do you notice anything different? I bet you do. Comment below. Hi, it's Todd with TLF Works. Today we're going to talk about how this sled works. Specifically, how we can use this little U-shaped, I've been calling it a Pen Blank Sizing Jig, how we can use this to help us do segmented pens. Not those crazy, awesome segmented pens with all the angles and everything in it, but some nice classy looking straight line segmented pens with different types of material in it, like maybe some little pieces of black or aluminum or white that we segment together, along with some scraps from making other pens. And so what I want to do is I want to spend some time and I want to talk about sort of the benefit of this with a bandsaw sled. And an important thing to talk about here also would be that I put a T-track in here, so I have a slidable stop, and that's all great, but you don't need that to do this work. We're going to put a block on here. You could just clamp it on there using one of these F clamps or something, right? Nothing special about this block and the fact that it's attached to the sled, other than I'm too lazy to go look for clamps all the time, and so this is just convenient for me. So let's get started here. We have a line here, this gap. This represents where the blade comes through the sled. And so if I take my pen sizing jig, my Pen Blank Sizing Jig, and I put it up here basically flush with that line, and then I set my stop block here right up against it on the other side. I'm flush, I'm up against the block. If I take my pen tube now and I put it in here, you see the distance between this edge and this edge never changes. So as this thing slides, the distance here is always the same as the distance over here, right? So when I'm set up like this now, and I take a potential pen blank and I put it in there, and if I just put a line on here right now, because I'm not going to go over to the saw, if I put a line on there that represents where that bandsaw would have cut, right there, and I look at my tube, if I make that cut, this piece of wood is going to be the exact same size as that tube. This is not what I want to do, okay? And the reason for this is pretty straightforward. If I go back to the bandsaw and I make this cut, bandsaws aren't as accurate as like a table saw or something like that. So this cut might not be exactly straight. And there's definitely going to be saw marks in it and stuff like that. What I'm trying to get at here is there's additional work that I'm going to have to do to this piece of wood to either make it ready to drill out to accept this tube, or I'm going to need to, and I always do this, I'm going to need to be able to do barrel trimming to flush out and square the blank to the tube. This is not my ultimate setup right now. So let's talk about what that ultimate setup might be for you. And this might depend on the type of material that you're going to be cutting at the time. I want to set this up to represent the extra space that I would want on the tube. If I'm flush, it's going to be the exact size. Every little piece, every little millimeter, every little hundredth of an inch that I move this over represents the extra length in that blank. So let's set it to, and this doesn't have to be, for me, this doesn't have to be a precise measurement. I just want there to be extra length in that blank, so when I drill it out, if there's a little bit of blowout on the end of that tube, I can flush it down. If the saw's not straight, I can flush it off straight. Most of what I'm going to deal with here with this extra space comes to when I drill this thing out and when I want to barrel trim it flush to my tube. So let's set the stop there. Throw our pen tube in, put our piece of wood down, and now let's look at the new line. If I put my blank up, I can see that my new cut line, if I was going to be drilling this tube out, would give me this much right here, waste, slop, overage, whatever you would want to call it. This is important. Let's try it out. I'm going to cut along this edge so we'll be able to see what's happening there. Hold this flush. Now once I have that in there, I can let that go. I'm just worried about this, right? So let's start this thing up. So if we take a look at what just happened, and we can see the slop, the extra. Now truthfully for me, I like a little more than that. So I would take this jig and adjust it over a little bit further, about right there. And you can see that that's going to give another 1/16 of an inch or something for us to have as a safety for us later. And remember, that extra, it's going to get sanded off, or the barrel trimming is going to take care of it. That's going to disappear. What makes this exciting is when you start to use this jig in association with basic segmenting, where you're going to build little accent pieces to go on the ends of blanks. Because the issue there, and the reason I like this, is I don't want to have to do math and figure out how big this piece needs to be when I'm going to have a sliver of some piece on the end of it, some stuff in between it here. You know, that same stuff is going to be on the other end. I don't want to have to do the math and understand how much of this stuff I need to, you know, take into consideration, how much of it's flat. I don't want to do math to figure out what the width of this is. And this little jig will do it for me automatically. And that's what I'm going to show you now. Let's use this little piece here. This is looks like it was stabilized clear maple or box elder or something like that. We're going to use this, and we're going to cut a couple of accent pieces off of it. We're going to append some little smaller accents on one end of it, and then the body of our blank will go up against that on both ends to make our actual pen blank. So I want to talk through what it's going to take to do that. I just need to pick out an actual blank, because I'm not using this on a pen. Okay, so I found this little piece of olive wood. I think we're going to see what this looks like with this little bit of olive wood and this maple or box elder or whatever this is making up the ends. I'm not going to pull out the measuring tape or anything here, but I know that there's a little bit of this thing's not square, so I'm going to square it up. So I'm going to get rid of that end. And then I want my finished accent piece to be that size, or maybe a little bigger than that right there. And I want to account for waste. So I'm going to cut it about that big. And if we put the tape on it, just for tape's sake, we're talking, you know, it's about a 1/2 inch. Now, a lot of that's going to come off with the barrel trimmer, but it's what we're going to do. So what I'll do here with the sled is I'm going to set my stop block up over here. I'm going to set that block up to where I can make that cut. I'll trim it square first, then I'll make a cut, I'll make another cut, and I'll come back and we'll put that on our piece here, and we'll start to see what it's looking like. now that we have our accent pieces cut, half of each of these, or about half of each of these, was added in for overage. So I know that the size of these are going to be reduced later on both sides. This isn't going to change, but what I need to know now is I need to know how big to cut this middle piece so that when I sandwich it between these two, I have a correctly sized blank. This is the beauty of this little piece right here. If this is twice the size that it needs to be, right here, that means that half of this one and half of that one represents the extra length that I have, that I want to have when I make the blank, but before it's drilled out. That means if I put that here and I set my stop, this distance right here represents that overage on each end of this blank. So now, if I take all of this and put it here, put my tube in, this represents right here, this represents the length that I need for the body of this blank, so that later when I add this stuff in here and I put my tube up there, I take one of these out, because remember, that's the width of everything that's going to be barrel trimmed off and sanded off later. That's my extra. I take that out, and that's my length. Right there. I didn't have to use my tape measure or anything to determine this length. I'm going to glue all of these pieces together. I'm going to create these accent pieces. And make sure that, because I want to make sure I'm taking into consideration the width of the glue and all that stuff, but before I actually make the cut. That's the beauty of this right here, is that for me, and let me tell you, I don't like doing math measurements and trying to determine slop. This gets me the right length of this that doesn't need to change. It gives me the right length for that, regardless of what size tube I was using. If I went and got a longer tube and I was going to make a different size pen, this jig is already set up for that different size pen. So let me run over, make this cut, glue all this stuff up, and we'll come back and assemble this and see if it's the right size. Okay, so I've glued up my accent pieces that will cap this other blank. I don't like the looks of this combination. I'm going to pick something else out instead of this olive wood. A while back I bought this bag. Purple Heart cutoffs. $5. Looking for one that might be shorter than some of the others. We're going to put Purple Heart in the middle. Let's make our cut. Let's try it out. This is our theoretical body of this blank. This goes into my cutoffs. Maybe I'll use that to make accent pieces later. Let's go ahead and put this in its theoretical orientation here. And let's hold the pen tube up to it. And after we're done drilling and we've sized, that's the fit I'm looking for. Half of each of these will be taken off, leaving me with my accent pieces and the exact length of blank that I needed in the middle. And this is repeatable. If I was making 20 of these right now, this thing is set up and I just fly through it. So there we have it. I'm going to go ahead and glue these together, and I'll turn this pen and I'll throw up a picture of it at the end. Thank you very much, and I'll see you later. Okay, so here we have the finished pen.